Time now to take a look through today's newspapers. We're joined on set for that by Alison Sargent. And Alison, we're going to start in China. The latest on the coronavirus there. Authorities deciding to close down an entire city.
That's right, Even. This shutdown comes as all of China is really gearing up to celebrate their big holiday, the Lunar New Year, a time when many people travel all over the country. Many people also come home and then in theory would be leaving again. On the front page of the Global Times, you see this crowd of travelers all wearing masks to protect themselves. The paper writes that the coronavirus is hovering over these celebrations like sort of a specter. The Global Times and other Chinese papers like the China Daily are focusing really on the global effort that's now underway to stop the spread of this virus. The Chinese President Xi Jinping, they report, has been talking on the phone with leaders from around the world, Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron. The virus is also on the front page of French papers today, notably Libération. In their article, the paper writes, "When China coughs, the whole planet worries."
Indeed, the worries of that virus getting expressed really across the world.
That's right. Britain is on virus alert. That's the front page today from the British paper, The Eye. They note that Heathrow Airport is starting to screen passengers on flights from China for flu-like symptoms. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is still assessing whether or not this outbreak actually does constitute a global health emergency. The Washington Post, meanwhile, reports that many are wondering if this death count of 17 could actually be much higher. Their reporter spoke to families in China whose loved ones died of symptoms that were very similar to coronavirus, but they say that they weren't ultimately listed officially in the death count from the virus. Instead, one woman who died with very similar symptoms was just listed as having died from pneumonia. The paper says that local journalists have also said that they were stopped from reporting about the virus. And so the Washington Post says that all of this has really led many to suspect that there might be something fishy going on, that maybe the Chinese government is in some ways looking to control this narrative.
Well, speaking of trying to control the narrative, let's move to Israel. There, the country set to host commemorations for the 75th anniversary of the Liberation of Auschwitz. But it's an event that has sparked quite a bit of tension.
That's right, Eve. Auschwitz has become a battlefield of memory. That's a headline from Swiss paper Le Temps today. In particular, these commemorations in Israel have sparked a diplomatic clash between Poland and Russia. Now, Poland's president is not going to be at the event. He refused his invitation after learning that he was not invited to give a speech, when meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin will not only be there, but he will be giving a speech. And Le Temps explains that from Poland's perspective, this event is in many ways sort of whitewashing Russia's history of collaborating with Nazis, notably over the occupation of Poland, because Russia and Germany split Poland in two. So from Poland's perspective, Russia is sort of being made innocent in history, whereas Poland's status as a victim, they feel, is meanwhile sort of being erased. Now, Poland's president, Andrzej Duda, may not be attending commemorations, but interestingly, he has taken out a full-page communique in French paper Le Figaro. He writes here that being forced to host Nazi concentration camps remains an unbearable humiliation for Poland. And he ends by making a plug for commemorations that will be held on Monday in Poland at Auschwitz. And the fact that Auschwitz wasn't actually the site for today's commemorations has also been quite a bit of a sore point in Poland, because Auschwitz is, of course, the camp itself, which is in Poland.
Indeed, and that day is the 27th, which falls on Monday. Well, diplomatic tension isn't the only thing stealing headlines out of Jerusalem, however. The French President Emmanuel Macron made quite a bit of a buzz on Wednesday after he got in kerfuffles with the Israeli security.
That's right. This video went quite viral, Eve. It took place at the Church of St. Anne, which is actually French territory. We saw Macron yelling in English at Israeli forces who entered the church in front of him. He said they didn't have the right to be there and kind of shouted at them, "Get out, get out." Macron has said that this incident was not premeditated to get sort of attention in France, but French papers are not very convinced by this. We can see Libération's headline here. They say Macron, or Jupiter as they call him, fait son chichi. Now, chichi has a double meaning. First, it means to be sort of overly dramatic, to be making a fuss, but it was also the nickname of the late French president, Jacques Chirac. And Jacques Chirac famously told off Israeli security forces in a very similar scene back in the 1990s. He became quite famous for that phrase, "Do you want me to get back on on my plane. Anyway, this parallel was lost on no one here in France, and Libération really thinks this was an intentional moment from Macron.
Well, I have to say, I think it's the first thing many of us did think about when we saw it. Finally, Alison, from you, a warning that stress, like what we've seen in images there, does actually make your hair go grey faster.
That's right. This is something many of us think we've sort of seen with our own eyes. Lots of people think about Barack Obama, who over his time as president, gradually it became gray. The Guardian has chosen Obama as their illustration to this article. They explain that according to researchers at Harvard, this is a real thing. The nerves involved in fight or flight stress pump out a hormone that wipes out the cells that make hair pigment, turning your hair to white. On the bright side, they say this research could help lead to the development of treatments that slow down the aging process. In the meantime, those who undergo stress and have their hair turn white are just going to have to buy hair dye.
Or live with grey hair.
Yeah, or live with grey hair.
Alison Sargent, thanks a lot for that look at the international papers.